Well, we would have been on a few moments earlier, but Nicholas over here had to clear his throat for about 5 minutes, so slight delay. But welcome back to TLDR. I'm your friendly neighborhood backcracker, Dr. Joe. With me, as always, is my hunk and grime, and together we are the Plaid Boys of the DSG. Friar, my guy, how's it going?
Yeah, no longer the backward hats boys because you always want to wear that hat front facing, which I
Well, I do.
understand
It's
and
sharp,
respect.
right?
Yes, two of a kind. But yes, I did not planned that we're both wearing plaid today. I love how that worked out. I appreciated it more until you decided to insult me before the show, but that's cool. That's the way it's going to go today. I
You
hope Violet
jacked up
mooned
my
you.
eardrums with your throat clearing there.
Oh, geez, I did it right into the mic again, didn't I? Well, between that and I told Violet to make sure she moons you again today during the show. It's gonna be a wild ride this week again for sure.
I gotta tell you what, that might be the greatest moment we've had on this show, and we've had some great moments. But I mean, that's in all seriousness. That I'm still cracking up about that. I'm glad it wasn't on camera because I don't want
No.
people seeing my daughter's backside. But like catching that out of the corner of my eye and the shit-eating grin she had on her face was just like next level comedy. Kid gets it.
Proud papa moment. That's what it is. Yeah. I will say the only reason I'd contest it is because there's probably been like 2 or 3 other awesome moments that you had on this show.
Well, a couple, but
yeah.
that was that was.
Those are all the high points of our show. Aside from we have our interviews and everything, but Violet takes the cake 100%.
No, 100%.
So let's see. We have a lot planned for today. 2 books that we've both been waiting to talk about for a long time. 2 big time books. One more so because of the novel's history, and then of course the cinematic release that we had recently. And then there's another comic book that's talked about a lot in the DSG, and just a legendary comic in and of itself that we will get to. But first, we want to let you all know, I mentioned this during the Comic Book Minute, last Change My Mind, where we had Casey Walsh on to do a bunch of MCU rumors. Holy shit, Doc, a lot of stuff. Had to take my headphones off at one point because I didn't want to hear some of the things Casey had to say. But we are doing our TLDR comic book gift guide next week. We just decided recently that we were going to do this. This is going to be something for people who read comics a ton like us, reminders about some books maybe we've talked about before, some books that we didn't get to talk about at length because Joe and I have been reading them ongoing or whatever, because obviously everybody knows the nature of our show. And then we'll be doing some books for people who are getting new to comics too. So the whole smorgasbord of stuff, but I'm very excited to do that next episode of TLDR.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And it's funny because you first proposed this and I said, because we got a busy month. We got a busy couple 2 months.
We do,
with a lot of different things coming on and things that we have planned for the show. Interviews aside, specials and all that. But the more we talked about it, this is actually a great idea. Let's use this opportunity to talk about books that, like you said, we wouldn't talk about here because we've been reading them, and hopefully some people will listen and be like, you know what, that's a great idea. Go out and I know I went out and I bought my nephew a couple of books that I'm really excited to give him. I think I talked about that last week. And so hopefully, other people, whether it be, fathers to their kids or, uncles or aunts, any just great gifts that we've got planned. So hopefully people enjoy that.
Very, very excited about that. I'm not excited about catching up this week. Always my least favorite segment on the show, but I'm actually the only one that has something to offer in catching up this week. Am I right?
Yeah, well, the holidays have really eaten up a lot of my reading time here, so I've got nada this week.
Excuses. But let's see. For me, there were 2 indie books that I really wanted to get to. One came out a couple weeks ago. I'm actually going to save that one last. But the United States of Captain America issue 5, final issue, solid. It was a solid series, and this is one where I don't know when the trade's coming out, but you could probably find all 5 issues at your local comic shop. I'm sure they got a ton. Captain America is definitely a tough character to write, but you got a lot of different characters in there. You have Falcon, you have Winter Soldier, you have U.S. Agent, and I think for anybody that is looking to get their kid, like a young kid who's a fan of the MCU, I think this is a perfect fit. If you've just been looking for something halfway decent involving Captain America, I would say this is pretty good too. Not a knock your socks off series, but definitely solid. But it is. I will say one thing that's really important is the way it talks about diversity and everything, and that again for younger kids, definitely important thing to read. But a solid series all around. And again, Captain America, just like we don't read a ton of Captain America stuff. I mean, I can't remember what was it, the Ed Brubaker series with Winter Soldier. That's the only one I think we've talked about on here, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
Then we got My Date with Monsters from Aftershock. This is by Paul Tobin. Of course, he wrote Bunny Mask, which I talked about a little while ago. That trade is not out yet, but once that gets out, make sure you guys go pick that up if you haven't read this series already. Outstanding. This first issue, I don't know if I'm going to give the second one a chance. I mean, I liked what Tobin did with Bunny Mask. I kind of want to, but it just didn't really do anything for me. What did do something for me, though, is Good Boy, issue 1 from Source Press Point. And Joe, I saw the cover for this, and I actually ended up getting the variant, but I saw the main cover that won me over at first, but I liked the variant a little bit more for those watching us on our stream, whether it's on Twitter or YouTube. And Good Boy is basically John Wick, but instead of John Wick living, it's the dog. And the dog also like can walk around and talk and all that stuff. So it's but like still has very much a dog mind. And I was like, oh, I could see this dog's kind of got a badass vibe and everything. I'll give it a shot. And then read it. I was like, yeah, I like this. It's different. It's definitely not something I normally read, but I absolutely enjoyed it, and we'll be staying with this series at least going into the second issue.
That's funny because that's when I remember when Stray Dogs came out. It's like I'm not reading this. It's dogs. It looks silly. Right? It looks like it's for kids. And then I talked about on the show, and I absolutely loved it. It was a fantastic book. And so like same thing here. It's like okay, it's John Wick but with dogs. I'll pass. And but you really seem to love it, so we'll have to see where it goes.
Source Point Press too. We don't talk a lot about them, but we actually met some of those guys at Boston Comic Con. I picked up a few things from them that I still got to get to. If you look at the stacks that Joe and I have at our respective homes, it is we are drowning in books. And honestly, I always kind of like that feeling when I don't. There was a point where I was catching up on stuff too easily at one point. I don't like this because now when I want to read in a down moment, I can't. Now just forget it. Never mind. And then there's the Hoopla app too, Joe, which is really great. You should get that.
I've heard about that.
You'll never.
I've heard about that. I never get to my local library and get a card.
But we're not yet looking back on the books that you can get on Hoopla now. We want to talk about what's new next. And let's start off with Marvel because, of course, this week was a monumental week because this week we got the first issue of Captain America, Iron Man 1.
Huge.
Hey, seriously, better than I expected. But there were it was again another thing that's like fine. Seriously, though, the big thing that we got this week is Devil's Reign, issue 1. Our Daredevil guy here. Of course, we've had Chip Zdarsky on the show. You're still coming down from that interview. How was it?
Well, so I'll tell you what. So I talked about last week how, Daredevil 36 was very bittersweet, because it's been such a great run and all those characters. And so Devil's Reign, I mean, Chip talked about it on the show. He said, this is very much going to be a Wilson Fisk story. And holy shit.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Like, you get Wilson Fisk has snapped.
Okay.
And what he goes through or what he cooks up right from the get-go and the ripple effects that it has with anybody with any smidge of superpowers is holy shit is the only way I can describe this. And the way it starts, it's a nice slow build, and then you hit this moment with Wilson Fisk, declaring war on anyone with superpowers, and then the way it ends, and you go, oh man, this is gonna be good.
Okay,
and so he's about 5 steps ahead of everyone right now.
That's outstanding, and that makes perfect sense for Fisk, of course. What I think the most important thing for our listeners coming out of this, as much as I'm sure a lot of people have been reading Zdarsky's run on Daredevil, of course, 36 issues?
36 was the last one, yep.
Of course, that just came out recently. But for those who haven't been on it, on the entirety or behind, like myself, is Devil's Reign something that you think people will be able to, after the first issue, I'm saying, are people going to be able to read that if they haven't been up to date like you are?
I mean, I think so. It's sort of like, I would sort of equate it to like reading, say, War of the Realms. I hadn't read the Thor run up until that point, but I was able to pick it up as I went along. Okay. So there is a little bit of that, like catching people up in the beginning of the book. Not a ton of it, and it's not, but I think for those who hadn't read the Daredevil run, there might be some things where they're like, okay, this, I don't know, where this came from, but you'll be able to read it if you hadn't read Daredevil. Go, this is really fucking good.
Yeah. Okay, right? Good. Good.
Yeah,
That's
100%.
most important because I have every intention of being on top of this, but I wanted to hold off until I heard from you on the show. Is this something that I'm absolutely going to be able to read, or am I better off just kind of waiting? Get going on Daredevil because I've only read so much of it.
I mean, there's stuff that'll make a lot more sense had you read it, no doubt,
Okay.
right?
Because there's
Especially
so much with this Devil's Reign that we're seeing. We're seeing like there's that Doc Ock stuff with like what was it the not Fantastic Four but whatever like this
the
like
Doc Ock stuff is great, but we get a little cameo from Moon Knight.
well, and Moon Knight's got his own thing, his own
Yeah,
one off in this series too. And then there's X-Men stuff. There's a whole ton. We shared some
the
of the
X-Men stuff
screens.
was great. So
Oh
it
my
was like it was just a quick thing.
god.
And I'm not going to say anything because it's not that it'll spoil it, but I want that moment, like when you see it, you go, "Oh shit, they're not fucking around." You know,
Okay. All
it's
right.
good. It's
I
good.
like that. Of
Chip's done
course.
it.
Of course he has. Speaking of X-Men, of course we have Inferno issue 3 this week. I've been really enjoying how they've been how that series has been going. Maybe I'll talk about that on the show. It's definitely got like that kind of potential and obviously the magnitude of it and everything. But we also got Star Wars 19, X-Men Legends issue 9, F4, Life Story issue 5. I don't know why we still list that. Nobody reads that. Let's see. No, you do. No, you don't. You're lying. The Death of Doctor Strange, Blade issue 1,
I'm gonna talk
Giant
about it on this show just to really chap your ass.
Giant Size, Black Cat, Infinity Score issue 1, Crimson Reign issue 1, which I will get to. I'm a little behind on that. Captain America, Iron Man issue 1. I mentioned that off the top jokingly, but actually a solid first issue. Definitely a good one for the younger audience and people who are missing, Cap and Iron Man want a little bit more. That definitely captures the two of them and like what everybody got, how most people got to know them in the MCU. We move over to DC. I'll run through all these real quick before we get to the big book that came up from DC. Batman 89 issue 4, Swamp Thing 10, Superman Son of Kal-El issue 1, Suicide Squad 10, Arkham City The Order of the World issue 3, The Joker Presents Puzzle Box issue 5, Crush Lobo 7, which we're both reading, One Star Squadron issue 1, Soul Plumber 3, Batman 118, which you're reading, World of Krypton issue 1, which you did read?
I read it and I don't like it.
Okay,
The art just took me. The art wasn't my cup of tea. Yeah, it was just like, you know what? No, I only read it. Like I was about to stop reading it about 2 pages in.
Really?
And it's like it's just the art took me
Mega
out
Man?
of it. Wasn't my cup of tea.
Long necks again?
No, not long neck. Really boxy heads. Actually, the heads were like disproportionate to their body and very boxy. I was like, no, this is not for me.
Odd choice. But we're
Yeah.
not getting odd art at all in Dark Knights of Steel. Of course, issue 2 came out this week. Yasmin Putri is look, Tom Taylor is doing a great job with the writing of this series. It's off, first 2 issues have been absolute bangers, but Putri's art is absolutely like I don't know which is better in this series. Like she just knocks. She's amazing.
Yeah, it was a phenomenal second issue. 12 issues, I believe this series is going to run.
Yes.
So, give me all the goddamn Dark Knights of Steel I can read because it is fantastic.
Yeah, 1,000%. This was another great issue, and
and the way this one ended.
Yeah.
Woo.
The end. So for those who saw the ending of the first issue, we won't spoil anything in case you're a little bit behind. But get on this series right away. This is absolutely must-read stuff. The end of the first issue was outstanding. The second one is another jaw dropper too, and but there's other things that we learn in the course of this, and other characters that we see, and we're just learning more like the line of who's good and who's bad in this, which is always whenever you're dealing with something like that, like you're getting quality. You're almost always getting a quality story. We're getting that here as the lines become a little bit grayer. And of course, I love Constantine's role in all this.
Yeah.
Well, we should do this, but are you sure we should do this? Like, I don't really know. Like, you're just such a friggin' asshole, John.
It was great. But you told us to do it. Yeah, but in hindsight, that maybe wasn't a good idea.
Yeah,
I thought that was great and
perfect.
Just real quick, Batman 118 begins Williamson's run
on
Batman. It was good. It was good. Yep,
okay,
I enjoyed it.
Nice, good. Very, very glad to hear that because they got him doing a lot over there, and obviously this is a lot of pressure taken on this title for sure after the people that have had it. And as much as you want King to stay away from Batman, like he was there for a while, and people did like him for a time. He just kind of did himself in with the Batcat mayor. stuff before even your Batcat stuff.
Yeah.
From Image this week, we got Crossover 10. What's the farthest place from here? Issue 2. The Good Asian 7, which I know you want to expand on. We'll get to that in a second. Two Moon 7. Nita Hawes Nightmare Blog issue 2, which Joe and I got to look at Nita Hawes 1 through 3 when we had Rodney on. Make sure you guys go listen to that interview if you haven't already. Had a great time with him. Oh, this series is so good. So like I stand by what I said. Like after the first 3 issues, I'm more excited about this than I am Philadelphia. As good as in Philadelphia, I said that to Rodney, and then like the last 2 issues of Philadelphia have been ratcheted up big time. I feel like.
Yeah. I still have to read the last issue. It's in my pile, but I think he took your advice and kicked it up a notch.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. You're welcome, everybody. Lady Mechanica, the Monster of the Ministry of Hell, issue 1, which I think there's other Lady Mechanica stuff that I want to go back and look at before I give any of this a shot. A Thing Called Truth, issue 2. But I mentioned Good Asian. I know there's one other book you want to expand on a little bit more, but tell me how Good Asian was, the book that you stole from me.
I mean, it's tremendous, Nick. I mean, it's your classic, noir story. It feels to me very much like L.A. Confidential, and the crime writer's name who wrote that is escaping me right now. He wrote a series of books, and it has that L.A. Confidential feel to it. If you ever seen the movie, which is absolutely fantastic. It's just. We're getting to a point now where every issue you're getting more questions and you're getting more reveals, and it's so well written. The art is the sort of gritty noir style, which is right up my alley. So I've been enjoying the hell out of this.
Okay, so I feel even that's good. I'm really glad you're enjoying the book that I was supposed to read from day one. And actually, I didn't get to ask you, how did you like King of Spies too? I know you got to read that last week.
Yeah, didn't read it. I told you I didn't read it.
I don't know if I believe you. We'll get to the truth of that at some point down the line. Definitely going to talk about on this show. One of the few 10 out of 10 books I've rated on Geeks Worldwide in a while.
That's
only
wild.
It was that one and it was from the
Conjuring.
You're such a dick. It was the death metal, Tales of the Multiverse spinoff of Hush. I thought they did a perfect job. That couldn't have been done any better, in my opinion. I saw no flaws in that. But other than that, I don't think I've ever given an individual issue 10 out of 10 outside of that and The King of Spies issue 1. But another book that, at least the way you're talking about it, I did not get a chance to look at this yet. But the Silver Coin, we've been really enjoying that series, but there's been some big time hits, some big time misses. Ram V got his crack with issue 7 this week, and you are very high on it.
It might be my favorite one.
Oh,
right.
Okay, give me. I haven't looked at it at all. Give me where's it set?
Vegas.
Oh, okay. Vegas,
Vegas. Think of
now.
Now. Just think of it though. It's it's a perfect setting for a silver coin. A guy wins it in a slot machine, and then what transpires from there and the way it ends. I mean, so what we've gotten in past silver coin issues is you get the story and then you get this slow build into descent, right? Mm-hmm. And the descent here is absolutely tremendous, right? But it's the ending, the way it ends, because what Ram V does very brilliantly in this issue is that he's telling 2 stories, right? You get the story that's currently going on with the coin, and then he's doing this narration comparing it to an ancient civilization, and then how it just merges at the end is fucking brilliant.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, you don't need to sell me on this any further. I want to read as much of the Silver Coin as I can because
it was awesome. And the art too. The art was great. Michael Walsh, I think he's been the artist on all the books.
Yeah, right? Way Chip, when we talked, because we talked to him about it very briefly, but I think it's his series and he's bringing in artists on the series.
Although it still says Michael Walsh with Chip Zdarsky,
right.
And Jeff Lemire and Kelly Thompson and one other person, but we've had other writers that aren't on that list in there, so I think it's sort of like their brainchild. He might be the ringleader, and then he's just bringing more and more people
It
in.
would make sense just because he's the artist on this series. Like he's the only person. Like we've seen a bunch of different writers.
Yeah, he
but
kills it in this
he's
episode.
the only.
This issue.
So no eye worms.
No fucking eye worms.
It's the absolute worst. If we ever have Jeff Lemire on the show, we have to talk to him about that because that was a problem. Let's see. We got Dark Horse Daisy issue 1, Dynamite Red Sonja 4, which you have been reading, Aftershock Tales of Mother F Goose issue 1, which we don't get review copies, but I'm definitely picking this up.
You're gonna pick that? Okay, good. I want to hear about it.
Okay. IDW TMNT, the best of Shredder. Very much gotta grab this one. Canto 3, Lionhearted issue 5, my least favorite series out there. I think it's a goddamn mouthful every time. What about AWA? Big week for them.
Big week for them. So Knighted number 2, which I have to read. But the book that I enjoyed from them this week, and I wrote the review will be up on Geeks Worldwide, is The Crimson Cage number 1. They've been hyping this one, promoting this one for a few months now. And it's Macbeth, but set in the world of 1980s independent wrestling. And so as a wrestling fan and growing up as a kid, really watching wrestling for the first time in the late 80s, and being fan of the Bret Harts and the Ric Flair and all that stuff, and then going back and watching some of these documentaries on wrestling from that time period, like it captures that feel. This is written by John Lees, the same writer of Hotel, so he can do horror, right? And so because it's Macbeth, because it takes place in Louisiana, in the bayou, you get a lot of good horror vibes. And while the Macbeth, might be a little on the nose, it's still really, really well told. I really enjoyed it. I can't wait for the next issue. This, like, for any fan of wrestling and this is going to be like a perfect book for you. And even if you're not a wrestling fan, I think you'd enjoy it.
Okay, see, that's the big thing for me. Now, knowing I forgot that Lees was the writer on this, and obviously Hotel. We can't say enough nice things about Hotel. So I do trust that Lees, whatever, like, he's gonna understand the area that he's working in and gonna do a kick-ass job with it. My thing is, I am just not a wrestling person. I didn't care for it as a kid. I wasn't like my dad was not a wrestling fan. I tried watching it when Becky Lynch came around because I just thought she was such a friggin' badass and a nut job, in the best ways. But I just watched it. Couldn't care less when I was watching it. So that if you stay at this level of like excitement over this series, I would assume you'll talk about it on here. When that day comes, I want you to sell me on it big time. Like how, like as a non-wrestling fan, because I'm sure we have listeners that like wrestling and we have some that don't, like me. And I'm curious, like, if really, like, why should I give this my time other than Lee's and it being AWA? Because those reason enough, kind of.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, I talked about, in the review when it gets posted is that, Macbeth, surprisingly enough, translates perfectly to wrestling, because what wrestling is, it's storytelling, right? Yeah. You get the action, you've got the elbows and the suplexes, all, and, the high flying theatrics and all that, right? You have the actual wrestling, but it's the storytelling, the promos, the storytelling that happens in the ring. It's soap opera for men, right? But Macbeth is just this great story of, fulfilling prophecies, witchcraft, envy, power, right? Wanting to ascend, to the top, and like that just meshes so well with what wrestling is and what these characters, are and what they do out and inside of the ring. So I was actually stunned. I go, this is actually like, it feels like this was made, like Macbeth was made for wrestling in an odd sense.
I would never have guessed that. Okay, well, you've sold me on it more so. Of course, we got a little bit of time to make sure that this is the banger of the series that it started out to be so far. But I don't have much doubt about that, of course, with it being from AWA. From Vault, we have Lunar issue 1. From Skybound, of course, a separate branch within or adjacent to Image, we have Oblivion Song issue 35 and The Walking Dead Deluxe 28 out this week. And then from Boom, we talked about it. The Return of Basilisk is here, issue 5. Of course, Cullen has been kicking ass with this series. For most other writers, I would say this is his best thing that he's got going right now. But it's like he's got 2 other absolute bangers right now in The Last Book You'll Ever Read and The Lucky Devil. That's just like, I mean, Basilisk is really, really good.
They're all
But
good, yeah.
they're all so freaking good.
Yeah.
When we have him on, like as those kind of those arcs come to their end, those first arcs, I think we will have him on to talk about all of them, because holy crap, we didn't get to touch base on any of those last time we had him on.
And there's still Parasomnia, which
Parasomnia.
I don't know if that's ended yet or not. That was only 4 issues, maybe 5 issues. I don't know if we've gotten the last one of that yet, but like at least 3 of those are absolute home runs.
Yeah, and that's another one where it's like when we're dealing with because we've seen with some of these companies, like the next one we're about to talk about has like 5 books out this week, but they haven't been doing as much recently, and the printing is obviously screwing with a lot of stuff. We're already talking about Boom. What am I saying with Basilisk? But then we have Mighty Morphin issue 14. Of course, you got the Altarian War going on right now. Outstanding. Ryan Parrott is. Kyle Higgins did a great job with it, and I know Ryan Parrott was doing Go-Go Power Rangers at that time too. But I'll tell you what, like Parrott having his own, like being able to run Mighty Morphin and just Power Rangers. Again, I feel weird saying it because like they're the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but no, it's Power Rangers and Mighty Morphin. Having him write the two, I think it only enhances what was already like a good thing that he had with Kyle before. And now this is just this war and all the twists that you've had with it. It's just like, oh, fuck. And Draken's involved too. So I obviously love that. But Magic the Gathering issue 9, Buckethead issue 1. I'm sorry, Buckhead. I keep wanting to say Buckethead every time I see that, which neither of us read. But there was another first issue from Boom this week that it was must read shit. We've been dying for this one. Joe, how did you feel about Buffy the Last Vampire Hunter?
I mean, I enjoyed it a lot. There wasn't a lot of action in it. It was definitely a slow build, but I think it laid the groundwork for what will be a really great story. I think Boom does a better job at this than with most, where they can give you an issue where there is a lot of sort of world building and storytelling, but not a lot of action, and you're still engaged and engrossed in it.
It's a great call. That is a great call. Yeah,
1,000%. And so I think the next issues. I don't know how long this is planned on being.
I thought it was 12 issues. And by the way, it's Buffy the Last Vampire Slayer, not the Last Vampire Hunter, for those who are going to try to pick that up this week. And yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Like Boom, like we see with some of these companies that they'll work with properties that, we saw on TV originally, or movies, or in case of the book that you're talking about today was a novel at first. But Boom does a really good job adapting a lot of that. I know we've seen Dark Horse do quite a bit of that. Of course, The Witcher, that new series is out this month on Netflix. I have a Witcher omnibus over on one of my tables in my living room. So yeah, but with Buffy, that was a really good start. Very high expectations coming into this first one. I know, actually, I'm only reviewing it for Geeks Worldwide. What am I saying? I was getting mixed up with a different one. But I will be reviewing this for Geeks Worldwide, so you guys will be able to check out a little bit more of my thoughts over there. But I don't want to waste any more time, because I thought you laid that out well, and it's time for you to talk about the book that you have planned for us this week.
Yes, so I'm talking about this book in a very timely manner. I wanted to talk about it earlier. It was, I believe, issue 12 was supposed to come out ahead of the theatrical release. And that book that I'm talking about is Dune, House of Atreides. So the plan originally was, because I get yelled at, from other members of the DSG about, you got to do it in a timely manner.
Oh my God.
It's got to be relevant. I tried. The fucking printing presses, wouldn't let me. But I've been dying to talk about this book because you're right. Boom, when they're adapting things, whether it's TV shows or, they do a really, really good job, with it. And so Dune, House of Atreides from Boom Studios, written by Brian Herbert, who is the son of Frank Herbert, who is the author of the original novel Dune.
Ooh.
And Kevin J. Anderson, who's sort of his writing partner. They've written a lot of Dune books in general, spin-offs, prequels, sequels, that sort of stuff. And artist is Dev Pramanik. Colors is Alex Guillemers. I butchered that.
There you got
it. And letters is Ed Dukeshire. And this has been an absolute stunning here we go, kiddo. All right, hold on, I'm distracted.
Oh, look at this.
This has been, I shouldn't say something, it's been an absolute fantastic read. So let me read the synopsis real quick, and then we'll dive into it. So Dune, House of Atreides transports readers to the far future on the desert planet Arrakis, where Pardo Kine seeks its secrets. Meanwhile, a violent coup is planned by the son of Emperor Elrond. An 8-year-old slave, Duncan Idaho, seeks to escape his cruel masters, and a young man named Leto Atreides begins his fateful journey. So this is a 12-issue series, and when I started reading this, I had not read the original Dune novel. And so when reading this the first time through, or at least the first 10 issues, because by then I had read the book,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say that I felt lost. It was very engaging, very engrossing story, but I definitely felt like these are characters I should know.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like, okay, there's stuff here that I'm not getting, but that's okay. It didn't take away from the book because the comic was still telling a really good story.
Okay.
And so this is a prequel series to the original novel. And, what this book does is it taps into what makes Dune such a great book and movie. And that is, not just the characters, but sort of the politics and the chess playing that goes on. And you see that it's very well evident in this book. I mean, I've said it before on the show. You know, George R. Martin. He basically just took Dune and took it from being a sci-fi thing that happens on other worlds, and just made it sort of in that fantasy, sort of medieval motif. It's the same thing. You've got your different houses. They're all going for political. I mean, it's a tale as old as time.
I
Everybody
don't know if
knows
I
it.
can stand for you talking about my fellow Northwestern alumni like this anymore, because he's,
Oh, George R. Martin.
yeah, cut from the same cloth, him
Yeah,
and I.
fuck that dumbass. You should have finished the fucking books, and maybe we'd had a better goddamn ending to
Uh,
what was a stellar series.
yep.
Holy
Yes, Stellar Show. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It was definitely frustrating. But anyways,
So it's very political, but what makes this series so great is that it is a prequel. You are getting origin stories to a lot of the characters that you know from either the book, or if you've never read the book, watch the movie. And so once
hmm.
I had read the book and then I was able to have an even greater appreciation for this series, because now the Benny Jesuit makes more sense. Some of the things that take place between the Bene Gesserit and the Harkonnens now makes more sense, and it
Hmm.
all comes to fruition in the book and in the movies. Some of the stuff which we haven't even seen, because Dune the movie we've just seen part one. So some of the stuff that is fleshed out in this series will undoubtedly play out in part two, of Dune. And so every character that that focuses on the book is compelling and intriguing. So each issue you'll get a few pages here on a young Duncan Idaho. You'll get a few pages here on
Oh,
the
okay.
Bene Gesserit. You'll get this story involving Leto Atreides, who in this series is about the age that Paul is in the movie, right? So we get a
Got it.
young Leto Atreides who is Paul's father. And you get some stuff on the Harkonnen, and so it all comes together, and it's just this big political chess match, and it really does set up the events that takes place in Dune. And I think it helps that the writer is the son of the original author, and so he knows the source material very well. And the art was great, and so
Well,
if
before you go on your next
yeah
point, you mentioned a little bit, but I just want to make sure I get a clear picture on this. You mentioned how you think that if someone hasn't, like, so for me, I haven't,
yeah
I'm interested in this because I know you liked it a lot, but I also know you read the book, and I know it's kind of hard when you know all that information, but I don't intend on reading the book. I might
but you saw
read
the
this,
movie.
but I saw the movie. Am I going to be fine?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, you might have to, IMDb some of the characters' names just to like put a face, the
hmm,
actor's face to the character's name.
got it.
But
Right,
some of the
because there are
characters,
different points in life. Yeah, okay,
right, exactly, and be, okay, gotcha. Right, my like little minor things like obviously because the book is more dense, and there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more information that you get, because that was my one beef with the movie. The movie was stunning. It was a great movie both from a storytelling standpoint and from a visual standpoint. But and this is just that age old thing where it's like, oh yeah, the book was better than the movie. Well, yeah, because you can make a book as long as you want. You can put it in as much detail as you want. Whereas a movie, like you gotta make cuts and you gotta make some changes to make it fit within a certain time frame. So like a lot of the stuff that I thought made the book so special was the political intrigue, the conspiracy, the chess match, that was going on, where a lot of that was just glossed over into the movie because they had to pace it in such a way.
So much
Right.
stuff in that movie already. Yeah.
Which, unlike Sweet Tooth, not to go back to that, but
Oh boy.
like Dune kept the tone and
Having
kept the
flashbacks.
spirit of the book true, whereas Sweet Tooth just completely said, no, we're doing a 180 here. So
completely different.
But the comic does a really great job at keeping that same tone, keeping, those characters are true to, who they are to become. And if you love the movie and you want to know more about the Dune world, this is a great place to start. It's 12 issues, right? And you get a lot of that background. There's still a lot of stuff that happens in the book that you don't have in the movie, which if you read the book, oh yes, that is fantastic. That really, but again, it's okay. You love the movie, you saw the movie, you love the movie, read this book, you'll have a better appreciation for not just the movie, but you're going to read this book. Oh, this whole world is tremendous. And so some of the characters that, the comic focuses on, the big one being Leto Atreides. He's played by Oscar Isaac, in the movie. So in the book, it's, he's a teenager. I think he's about 15, and his dad Paulus, sends him off to a different world, Planet 9, to study them. Because he's to become Duke one day, so he's now prepping him to, see the galaxy, see other planets, develop political friendships, right? And the moral leader that you get in Dune, the movie, and into the book, is born from this comic book. So you sort of see how that character becomes a character that he is to become later on, and his story throughout, really ends up being something. It's just fantastic, and the way that the last issue ends, with what Leto had to go through and what happens with the House Atreides and how he cements himself is really great stuff. So that was one of the main storylines going on. The other character is Baron Vladimir Harkenin, who in the movie, this is actually the one thing I did not like about the movie. He's got like this Doc Ock thing going on, right? Where he's like this, weird, almost kind of robotic, like alien figure in the movie. And, in the comic and in the book, he's just a man. He's a very, very powerful, conniving man, right? But, he's obviously much younger, in this, and he's very calculated. He's a very good chess player. The Harkonnens are the Lannisters. That's the best way. Like that's who the Harkonnens are, right? They're the Lannisters. And so, where the Lannisters were always 2-3 steps ahead, the Harkonnens are always 2-3 steps ahead. And they're very much in control of Arrakis and the spice trade, but they're also up to so much more. There's some legal stuff going on with spice that they're up to, and the ramifications that has throughout this series, and then where they end up. In the beginning of Dune, where the Harkonnens are on the way out and the Atreides are in. Like this sets that all up, and so like I said, this is a great place to start. The Benny Jesuit, which again, the movie didn't go into great detail about the Benny Jesuit and who they are and what they're capable of doing fully. You get that a little bit more fleshed out in this. It's definitely way more fleshed out in the book. But the Reverend Mother Moheim, who was the old woman who had Paul stick
with the box, yeah,
yep. So she's in this, and so the Benny Jesuit are obsessed with birthing I'm going to mispronounce this, the Kwisatz Haderach, which is a messiah of sorts. It's a being that is able to see all futures, and that's sort of what Dune the movie was leading up to with Paul Atreides, and his training from Lady Jessica, and what you'll get in part 2. That's all set up here. They're also playing this chess game where they're taking a look, because they're able to see all futures. They finally map out, what gene pool, what genetics they need to do to plant the seed, pun intended, to, get to where they need to get this, get this person, this Kei on their side, so they can really be the supreme, rulers of everything. So there's all this great intrigue, in this book and in this story. Dune is a fascinating world. It's a fascinating story. Two other characters I want to hit real quick. The Duncan Idaho origin is awesome.
Okay,
awesome,
nice.
because he's a kid. Again, he's about the same age as Leto is in this, but he's he's a slave. He's being hunted for sport. He's held captive, and you get the origin of not just his badassness and where he learned to become such a great fighter, but also his close relation to the Atreides, right, and all that. So that was great. And then lastly, Pardo Kynes. So in Dune the movie, you're introduced to Liet Kynes. She was the planetologist there. And so in the book, it's actually a male. They just made her a daughter. But in this comic, it's her father, Pardo Kynes, who's hired by Emperor Elrond to explore Arrakis to learn more about spice. And because he gets sent there as a planetologist, he's just, not only is he obsessed about just learning about different worlds, but he becomes obsessed with the Fremens. And this is where that Kynes-Fremen relationship begins, because he really, he saves the life of a Fremen. He gets, brought in. And so, like, there's just all this stuff, Nick. Like, if you love the book, if you love the movie, this is a comic you're going to want to read, because you get a lot of great information. Again, the intrigue, the action, the storytelling. This is just one of those worlds. It's like I said, it's a Star Wars universe. It's a Game of Thrones universe. It's this huge, massive thing where there's so much room for so much great storytelling, and this is a hell of a place to kick off with.
So you talk about how, you talk about Star Wars, we're talking about these vast worlds. And of course, we are guilty as anybody of like trying to take in a lot of Star Wars content, and as much as some of it can be frustrating. But with Dune, I saw this, and knowing very little about Dune, before the movie, I was like, okay, like, is this really something people are going to care about? So knowing you've been as high on it as you have been throughout, and we're talking about these characters as kids, not necessarily something I'm going to care about as much. But hearing like the way you felt about it the whole way through, I've been like just dying for you to talk about this on the show, so I can just go and read it whenever I damn well please. So I'm all in on this book. The thing I wanted to ask you, well, first of all, I get the impression that this is not something we'll ever see on the big screen, but do you think it's interesting enough that we could see it like in the small screen?
100%. This would make a tremendous series.
Okay.
Again, because you can expand on it even, right? Like the story you get from issue 1 to issue 12 and all the different, chess pieces that happen. Like, this would make like a great first season.
Right.
And then like from there you could make, you could just develop more, as you go along. And so like I was saying before, like, reading this is only going to enhance what you already know of the world, of the characters, that you have already been introduced to, whether you've read the book or watched the movie, and as I said also earlier, like, whereas the Harkonnens are the Lannisters, right? I mean, the Jedi are the Benny Jesuit, right? Like, it's that same thing, that mind control thing, kind of thing, like you being able to use
it's amazing
the Force.
Marriage. Game of Thrones and Star Wars, it's an amazing marriage. That's what we're
getting.
I
mean, you can obviously tell, because I mean, Herbert wrote this thing a long time ago, like before, right? Any of those things. So you get why Lucas and Martin would borrow, use the term loosely, from that book, because it's a fascinating world. There's a great story to be there, and like I said, like, I think Boom, they put out a one shot on the Sardaukar, which we learned a little bit about in the movie. They've got another one shot coming out, and I think they have another series.
That's what I was going
as
to ask
well.
you. Is there something else? Because it sounds like they could. It's just a matter of where. But I mean, the fact that they did so well in this series leads me to believe that whatever the next one is that they do is going to be is promising, at least.
You could do a series on the Fremen, on just the Fremen and their history and their lore and their time on Arrakis and all that. Like, you could do a book just on the Benny I mean, there's so much content that you could, pull from here and make. It would be great stuff. Very
Awesome.
welcomed. Yeah.
That's good to hear that like you can do more in the world of comics too, and I would love to see them just keep pushing it there because you've already got the novel and everything. Like this is you're going to reach a different.
There's like 6 or 7 of them, right? I think comics is probably the best way to go because you can tell a story in a, like in a 12-issue arc that's going to be satisfying and not so dense because those novels are some thick bitches,
right? And if you're going to go and do a show like we're talking about with this and you want to do other spin-off shows or like one series that's just a bunch of spin-offs, then doing it in the world of comics and kind of testing it there and seeing how the success of it, like then you can either learn and make mistake or learn from your mistakes there, or just kind of abandon it altogether and not do a show if you don't necessarily want to. But like we're seeing that a ton with comics. Like everything gets optioned for shows and movies and whatever. So like that is it's a great testing ground for these studios. And speaking of stuff that's been optioned for shows and movies, I'm going to move over to my book now, Joe, if that's okay, unless you have anything else on Dune House of Atreides.
I give you permission to move on, Nicholas.
Thank you very much. Well, I am going to be talking about American Vampire 1976. And I got to imagine this has been optioned at some point and maybe just, there's no follow through on it or whatever. But the fact that we don't have an American Vampire show or movies is mind-blowing because this was such a big-time series. I mean, this is what Scott Snyder is known for. I guess people are going to say Batman first. This would be second. You could probably say vice versa. I don't know what he would necessarily say. I never asked him. Like, I bet you he would give us an answer like I can't pick just one because right? Yeah, okay. But of course, this was originally a Vertigo series and has since become a DC Black Label series. The American Vampire 1976 was strictly a Black Label series that ran, I believe it was 2019 into 2020. We just got the hardcover version of this a little bit ago. The reason I wanted to do it this week, or this month at least, was because we're supposed to be getting American Vampire, the trade paperback version this month. A great gift for someone to pick up, especially for someone who's read American Vampire but didn't necessarily get on this right away, like our friend Rich Keefe, who had asked me about this multiple times. And I want to clear a little bit of the air here because you had said you were surprised at how excited I was to talk about this. So this was the #1 book on the #dork TLDR horror comics list. This was at #1. Davey and Keefe had it very high. I think Keefe had Walking Dead as his #1. I had this as #10. Of course, Joe, you only read a couple of the books, right? Because you want to just be able to talk about it on the
I didn't read enough of it to be able to properly rank it. Yeah,
of course. Still got #1. Still didn't matter. I put it 10, and what I said on that, and you guys can go watch that conversation on YouTube. We really had a great time, the four of us. But what I said at the time, and I still stand by, is American Vampire is a great story. Snyder Rafael Albuquerque built this amazing world, and all around, it is an awesome series. It was not. I was too far removed from it at the time because I went and reread a ton, and I'd forgotten. I knew it was good. I just forgot how freaking good it was. I still wouldn't change where I ranked it because when we're talking about horror books, like yes, this is violent. Yes, you're dealing with vampires, and these vampires are not like what's that stupid movie with oh my God, with the guy who's Batman now, Pattinson. What's the Batman, the vampire movie? Do you remember? The one that was the book in the hit series that came out.
Twilight.
Thank you. It's not like we're not dealing with like twinkling vampires or shit like that. We're dealing with some gruesome ass motherfuckers. But this is not something that like scares me. Like this is not something like Hotel or The Autumnal or Scott's book Witches, which he's working on that show right now. Has not, by the way, said who that show is going to be with, like whether it's Prime or Netflix or whatever. But like, those things are like, oh fuck! Like you have a lot of like shivering moments in the course of reading that. With this, like. American Vampire is great and I absolutely love it and recommend it to anybody. It's more of a great story dealing with horror, like characters from the occult or the horror-ish, whatever you want to call it, all vampires and everything. And then you kind of get others introduced. So Rich had asked me for a while, how is this one? How is the new one? I want to pick it up. And I fell behind on it just because I had been so far removed from the 8th volume of it, which was the latest one prior to 1976. And I read like the first couple and I was like, okay, this is good. It feels like picking up where that one left off, but I'm just not in the headspace to read it right now. I went back, looked at a lot of the old stuff, especially the more recent American Vampire, talking like volume 8, and then I think it was 6 and 7. One of them's like an anthology in there, but really making sure I know everything that's going on with all of this shit, because there's a lot at play in American Vampire 1976. You're dealing with a big bad that you'd heard about quite a while back that you thought had been beaten, that pops up in the course of things. You're dealing with another big bad that you had met in, that you learned about in American Vampire 8. And I would say if like, this is absolutely something that you have to read all the other American Vampires in order to really fully appreciate this, because you'll hear mention of certain characters and it's like, hey, who are they talking about? And then Scott does a good job of like catching you up, but it's more like this is the 9th volume of a series. What do you expect? But that's kind of, I'm talking about American Vampire on the whole too, for people who haven't read the series. And I could not recommend this enough. As for the synopsis for American Vampire 1976, actually first, of course, written by Scott Snyder, artist Rafael Albuquerque. And then for American Vampire 1976, the colors were done by Dave McCaig. I don't know if he's the colors for all of American Vampire. I feel like he is. And then the letters were done by Steve Wands for the series. Now for the synopsis. Paranoia reigns supreme. It's 1976, and this is the final chapter of the Eisner Award-winning American Vampire, a seedy motorcycle rally in the desert where Skinner Sweet is closer than ever to his death wish. Pearl Jones and her shocking partner track him down for one last desperate mission as the series that launched the careers of superstars Scott Snyder and Rafael Albuquerque concludes. So this, of course, it collects American Vampires American Vampire 1976 issues 1 through 10 in the hardcover, and the trade will be the same thing. So yeah, the shocking partner, you find out who that was how it is in the first issue. And as much as you and I have talked about things that pop up in the first issue of a series, it's not really a spoiler when that happens, but it is kind of a surprise that if you haven't seen it already, I don't want to take it away from you, but I will say it's a character who you haven't seen in a while if you're an American Vampire fan. We'll leave it at that. There is a tease that we learned about. I want to say it was an American Vampire 5, that maybe it was 6, that was never made good on, that Scott and Raphael address in this, and they give you the whole lowdown on everything of what happened there. But what's really cool is Scott, one of the reasons that Scott's so good isn't just his world building, but the pacing of any story that he tells. He knows how to he will go and use, some characters here, some characters there, because there's always at least 2 angles to a story, right? Even when we're talking about good guys, like Saga, that's part of why Saga's so good, because everybody's all split up and all these characters converging onto one thing, but they're kept separate to certain pivotal moments. But Scott does that in this series, but he also does quite a bit of having these important characters together at once too. And he still manages to pace things very well. I feel like that can be a little bit challenging when we're talking about maintaining the focus of readers. Me being guilty as anybody, where you can kind of just space out. That's why comics are the preferred medium for me versus it's the truth. When I'm reading prose, I am reading I some prose stuff, but I definitely am prone to space out. If I'm tired, especially, or whatever. What, you got something to say?
I was gonna say, you let your mind, your imagination build that world, build that imagery for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in the past,
you got to be spoon-fed. Apparently,
yes. But I've definitely gotten better at that in the past few years. But in the past, it was definitely a challenge for me. And I think that's just because of the way my brain works, where I just can bounce around 15 different ways. Anyways, moving on. So yeah, so you're getting a lot of characters who it's been a few years. So some of these characters have aged. Of course, some of these are vampires, so they haven't aged. And then there's a lot of different groups and whatnot that we've heard from over the years, or heard about over the years. We haven't necessarily met them. We learn more about the history of vampirism in the U.S. and how important it was to this country, in this world, and how and how, Washington and everything like that, like his relationship with vampires and whatnot. It's a little bit different than what happens in Philadelphia, quite a bit different actually, but still they are, you learn a little bit more about that in Snyder and Rafael Albuquerque's world. But I think with this series too, like Scott is, what's interesting is like it's like Scott had made it sound like when we talked to him on the show, like Joe, we had him on one time and he definitely talked about American Vampire a little bit and we did not ask him about it. It might have been the first time we had him on, if not the second time. Am I making that up or does that sound right?
No, we definitely talked about it briefly, for
Okay.
sure. But the details of it, I can't remember.
Well, the
Can't
one
recall.
thing I thought that I was going to ask you about was I thought he said that this is like a good, like it's not necessarily the end for American Vampire. Like it's like,
Right. Yeah, I do recall that. Yeah, he
okay,
did say that.
thank you.
Yep.
Like he could absolutely leave it and never come back to it. Like the way he ends this, absolutely, it could be done. That's it, finite, and you'd be fine. Like you did a great job, but I'd also be fine with him picking it back up, especially with some of the stuff that happened like in the past. But there are certain things that happen to important characters where it's like, if you left it the way it is, you'd be fine. And I think Scott's busy enough where he maybe doesn't necessarily need to have to go back to this either. But it's a fitting end, I think, and there's a lot of surprises along the way. There's a big surprise in the first issue, but there's something I thought like nothing was going to top that as I'm reading this. But then there's another thing that happens later on in the in American Vampire 1976 where I'm just like, no fucking way. Did that seriously just happen? Like the script is flipped in one way, and then it's just also like you just never would have seen this coming, and it's just like perfect. Like, but what's so good like about this series is you don't the twists are great, but like Scott doesn't need to go and rely on those so heavily. Like you can get a twist right, and then you can be like okay for like a couple pages. Like you can get through those and you'll be fine. It's not like that. Like everything is quality, everything matters, and it's all these little things that just add up along the way. So, I mean, I know you haven't read it. I know at some point you will because we've had him on the show enough times that you got to read. His, like,
How many? How long is it? How many volumes?
It is. This is the ninth. This is the ninth volume. So maybe if we take a vacation,
9 volumes of so yeah, so 8,
yes.
and then this one. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So, but it's all. Even this one,
I can bang that out in a weekend.
All available on Hoopla. There is only one I would say you could probably get away without reading, where I think it's strictly anthologies, but even then, I think they're still dealing with like some of the other characters who you care about. So and it's all good. Like I wouldn't skip over any of it. But yeah, it's funny like looking back on it now, like where things start in the first one, and just like the twists and stuff, but like just how far things have come. Where like you're dealing with like the Wild West, and now these characters are in 1976, and just a whole different world. But at the same time, it's also the same world that they've been dealing with.
Yeah, because I remember he talked. Now it's coming back to me a little bit. He talked about how he loves this time period, and he thought vampires in '76 would tell a great story.
Yeah.
So
he did a really good job actually. When you talk about that, like that's a great point. How important that was to him. He definitely leans into that in a good way throughout the series, and just how like the division with vampirism and the country, and then the birth of this country and everything. I actually I didn't even think about it like that, but he did do a really good job now that you bring it up. But when we talk about show or movie, because we always do that with every book that you and I talk about on this show, I want to say show. I think it would do really well as a movie too, but I just think there's so much where you could go and make this like 6 seasons, 10 episodes a pop, put it on HBO, put it on Netflix, I don't care, whatever.
yeah,
And
I mean,
it's
9
just like,
volumes. That's more than enough to do. You could do a season or 2 seasons of volume. You know what I mean? Like
you could, yeah.
That's how I mean, by and large, unless it's like I think a very short contained story, TV shows are the way to do it. I mean, look what they've done with The Boys and Invincible and
Mm-hmm.
all those other ones that we love. Whereas like the movies, like they very rarely adopt or adapt, I should say, a single like comic story into a movie. They'll take elements
Mm.
from it, right? Like Infinity War. It's not like they just took the graphic novel and did a straight adaptation of it. They always just kind of take bits and pieces of it and do it. Whereas with TV shows, you can, I think, for the most part, like take the source material, stretch it out. You do X amount of 1 hour episode, 45-minute episodes per season, and have it be really satisfying.
Yeah, absolutely. As for the characters, again, there's an important character that pops up who's been away for a bit that you thought was, maybe you weren't going to see from or hear from again necessarily. But we do quite a bit in this series. I don't want to reveal who that is, but we do see that, like you've seen over the years in American Vampire, is you have Cal, you have Skinner Sweet, you have Pearl Jones, the main players, Travis Scott. In Felicia Book. I think I'll just leave it at those characters are pretty much the main players. And then if you read American Vampire, the 8th volume of American Vampire, the villains and everything, and that's a whole nother thing. Again, I don't want to spoil stuff because there's just so much more for you to read. But like the origin of that character and that character, the more so the number 2 to the big bad is very, very interesting. But there's a lot there, but that we're picking up off on all that stuff too. So if you've been waiting on it, if you were like our buddy Rich Keefe over on #Dork, don't wait any further. The hardcover is already out. It's on Hoopla. You should be able to buy the trade this month. But the only reason I'm hesitant, I know that's always been the plan, but the only reason I'm hesitant is just because of the printing stuff. Obviously, we saw what happened with the Scorched, which we're dying to get that. But yeah, great series, must read if you read American Vampire previously, 100%.
It sounds like Hoopla is our Adam Cole.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah, and actually, we don't give Adam Cole enough credit to. He did a great job with us on that horror comic book episode too. I mean, he's just a great number 2 to Rich on that.
Really
is on that show. Can't wait to do more of those two down the line. But, anyways, let's see, Joe. We of course talked about our gift guide that we're going to be doing next episode of TLDR. We'll be doing stuff for people who've been reading a ton of stuff like we are, people who maybe stepped away from it for a while, and for newbies especially, because those are the ones I think probably need a little bit more help. But between now and then, you can of course listen to if you're done listening to us, you can listen to Change My Mind, or you can listen to I've Heard It Both Ways. You guys are streaming Thursday this week,
season 3, episode 12, Earth, Wind, and wait for it.
That's how this is wait for it. Okay,
yeah.
Okay. I'm thinking that it's going to be like Barney Stinson from How I Met Your Mother. So, okay, I like that show. I watched that all through college. Oh my god,
that show was good for like I think the first 3 seasons, and then it just. I don't know. The ending really soured me, and it got repetitive after a while.
I bawled my eyes out from that ending, and part of it was sadness, part of it was frustration, but the other thing was too, like that was a show I watched through college, so like I put off watching the ending for so long, and then it was just like a weird experience for me, like weird life experience.
Like the first time through, I really enjoyed it, but like upon rewatch, like for me, like. The first 3 seasons are some of the best. I'll tell you what episode made me bawl my eyes out though was when Marshall's father died. Oh, that was because you got the numbers and they're counting down to something and you don't know what, and then when Lily gives him the news and
that was a lot.
Oh, that was a tough one.
Yeah, I will say though, your talk about how I Met Your Mother. Apparently, you've upset Frank in the chat, so it's time for us to go. Until next week. Joe, stay sexy.
You know it. Shut up, Frank.